It is said that certain precious stones are lucky, but Mr. Boddy was not superstitious. Rubies were precious because they were valuable. That was all. There was a fortune to be made by anyone who invented a way of manufacturing artificial rubies. And when one of the guests found such a way, then surely it must lead to wealth and happiness. Good friends would share in the fortune, and neighbors rejoice in the success of their friends. Maybe. But maybe rubies are not so lucky, because good luck seemed to desert Arlington Hall just as surely as it deserted poor Mr. Boddy himself.
Well, what have we here? The old Chateau Lafitte. You ever tried this one, Green?
Look, Boddy, you promised me 10% of the sales of those rubies. You can't back out of it now.
10%? I don't recall any 10%.
Don't treat me like one of your yokels, Boddy. Without me, you never would have patented that formula. And who found a solicitor that was even more crooked than the patent? If it hadn't been for me, even Plum would have seen what was going on, and he'd own the patent now, not you. So, don't get too clever with me, eh?
And what would you do if I did get clever, eh, Mr. Green? Go to the police, who would surely lock you up, or go to Plum, who would then call the police. Or perhaps you might consider a more extreme solution.
You won't double-cross me, Boddy. You wait and see.
A stain on the floor. Tests show it to be wine. Wrench, fingerprints Mr. Boddy, Mrs. White, and Mrs. Peacock.
I don't want you involved in this thing, that's all.
What, Uncle Boddy using the professor's formula, or whatever it is? Are you involved with Boddy?
Yes. And it's all going wrong. That's why I don't want you involved.
But I am involved. I don't care what you've done.
All I can tell you is that if Boddy double-crosses me, we're going to lose the money we need to get married. I'm still here to get married. I've got to find out whether Plum kept any records of his formula or of the first rubies he made. I can't trust Boddy if anything goes wrong and Plum gets the police involved.
Just tell me what to do. Nobody is going to harm you.
If Plum gets to those rubies first, then there's only one way left to stop Boddy from taking me down with him.
Fire grate, ash and fragments of paper. Plum's signature identified. Examination of the sofa reveals no evidence.
It's strange. You never really know how you feel about someone until they've gone. I honestly thought I cared for Uncle Boddy, but now I realise I must have hated him. For years he made my life a misery because he wouldn't release my money when I needed it. He's the trustee of my parents' estate, and he said that as long as he was in charge, he wouldn't let me have anything more than my allowance. But whatever you may think, I did not kill Uncle Boddy. I think you should look somewhere else. You might think I was snooping, but I heard what sounded like something cracking or breaking in the library. I looked in and there was Mrs. Peacock kneeling in front of the cupboard, trying to force the lock. I have no idea what she was up to. No, I'm sorry. I don't remember seeing anything like that at all. I'm not even sure I know what you're talking about. If there was such a thing, it would be in the cupboard in the hall with all the other junk. No, I certainly have not seen a lead pipe. If this were a game, I'd assume it was some kind of trick question. Spot the odd one out. Is it lead, is it brass, or is it copper? But the answer is still no. I haven't seen a lead pipe.
Whatever happened, I could not risk Plum finding his original formula, or his prototypes. You see, he would have been able to prove that Boddy had stolen his idea, and Boddy would have made sure that I was incriminated too. That's why I was so horrified when I discovered that Mrs. White had a piece of evidence which could blow the whole thing wide open. I think she told me because she trusted me. She can't have realized how involved I'd become. But she was the only one, I think. Colonel Mustard did make some threat earlier in the billiard room, but he was involved for entirely different reasons. Look, with respect, I'm hardly a mechanic. I haven't seen a wrench, and I've had far too much in my mind to notice something like that. I'd better tell you that Boddy more or less threatened me with a lead pipe in the hall. He made some remark about me wanting to kill him with it, presented it to me. I threw it back in the cupboard. Somehow, I don't think that Boddy was joking.
Rope lying under the table. A plate of cheese and a glass of port. Fingerprints on glass, Mr. Boddy's. A bloodstain on the chair. Tests show blood to be Mr. Boddy's.
Come on, Professor. It's no use standing there feeling sorry for yourself.
I can't believe he trampled all over me like that.
Well, what are you going to do about it?
But you know, that man still had the letter with the details of my formula. He had the nerve to wave it in front of my face.
Well, why don't you get it back? That way you could prove that the formula was yours.
He's got it locked away in the study.
Oh, come on, Professor. What are you, a man or a mouse?
Well, what am I going to do?
I don't care what you do. Brain him if he won't listen. And if you don't, I probably will.
The cookbook contains a carbon copy of a letter from Professor Plum to Mr. Boddy, accompanying the prototype synthetic rubies. Two candlesticks, one clean with no fingerprints, the other with fingerprints, of Professor Plum.
I don't suppose old Plum would have ever gone ahead with this ruby business if he'd known the trouble it was going to cause.
Well, don't start blaming him for what Mr. Boddy has done. Nobody forced Mr. Boddy to steal his idea, did they? Now, why don't you stop worrying about whose invention it was and do something useful? You can get me some string from that cupboard.
Hardly affects you, does it?
Doesn't affect me. Well, you people never did look beyond the end of your noses, did you? I know more than you think about the professor's invention.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
You see, I helped the professor write that letter to Mr. Boddy. I typed it for him. The letter with the formula in it. I kept a carbon copy of that letter.
Where is it? Can I see it?
No, you may not see it. But it's safe. I shall choose the time when it's right to use it.
Two candles. Knife in drawer, fingerprints Professor Plum, Mrs. Peacock, and Mr. Boddy. A single bullet hole.
You know what? Oh. What on earth are you doing wandering around with that? That's Boddy's gun, isn't it?
Yes, I took it from the study.
Oh, well, guns don't solve problems. Believe me, I should know.
I was desperate. I had to do something. If Uncle Boddy had released some of my trust money, we wouldn't be in all this trouble now.
You and Mr. Green.
Jonathan said he could go to jail if Uncle Boddy went ahead with marketing his rubies. And Professor Plum kicked up a row with the police. He couldn't survive in jail, Colonel. I just know he couldn't.
No. You may be right, my dear, but this is no way to do things. Boddy is a very dangerous man. Now.
No!
Boddy once showed me the candlesticks in the dining room. He was rather proud of them. I'm afraid they made little impact on me. No, I can't remember seeing them on this occasion. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I can't help you. I haven't seen anything resembling a lead pipe in this house. No, I have not seen a rope. Had I seen one, no doubt I would have been tempted to use it. One or two candidates immediately spring to mind. Of course I knew that Boddy kept a gun. Most of us knew that. But I certainly didn't see it on this occasion. Well, Boddy was not the type to flourish it under your nose. He was very careful with it. It was always under lock and key. Yes, I did see that knife. I saw it in the study first, but I actually found it in the lounge sometime later. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing. I took it into the library and forced open the cupboard to see if I could find Professor Plum's prototype rubies. I was lucky. The rubies were still there. So I took them with me. Oh, I hid the knife in the ballroom. Yes, I saw it. Boddy had what you describe as the wrench. He was trying to free the lock on the cupboard in the library with it. I was with him at the time, and I did handle it briefly. Oh, I don't know what happened to it after that. Yes, I saw it. Boddy had what you describe as the wrench. He was trying to free the lock on the cupboard in the library with it. I was with him at the time, and I did handle it briefly. I found out where Professor Plum's prototype rubies were. Boddy had shown them to me earlier in the day, and he must have returned them to the library. I broke into the cupboard and took them. I hid them until I could show them to the professor, but I think Mrs. White had the same idea. We were talking in the conservatory, and she said that she was going to find Plum's prototypes to prove that he owned the original formula. She seemed determined to do anything she could to stop Boddy.
Yes, of course I've seen the candlesticks. I see them every day. I had them down to give them a good polish earlier on. Professor Plum was in the dining room at the time, so I got him to carry one of them into the kitchen for me. I put them in the cupboard until I was ready. Yes, I saw the lead pipe, but I don't think it's my place to go around naming names. All I will say is that I saw it with a gentleman going towards the billiard room. Yes, and there's nothing odd about having rope around the place. I have some in the kitchen cupboard. In fact, when I asked Mr. Green to bring me some string to tie up the rubbish I was throwing out, he got me the rope instead. I think it's still in the dining room. I know where Mr. Boddy keeps that gun, but I can't remember seeing him with it for ages now. He'd go for weeks without using it, and then he'd use it for 2 or 3 days at a stretch. Target practice, he used to call it. No, he hasn't used it recently, at least not that I know of. I haven't seen any knife, unless you count the ones in the kitchen. They're the only ones I see regularly, although I don't suppose you mean them. I went into the library, and there was this great dirty wrench lying on the bookcase. I couldn't believe that anybody could be so careless. It could have scratched that bookcase, and it's a very old one. I put the wrench back in the cupboard in the hall. When I saw the way Mr. Boddy was treating Mrs. Peacock, I decided that I had to act. I knew where Mr. Boddy kept the rubies that the professor had given to him. They were in a cupboard in the library. But when I went to get them, someone had been there before me. They were gone. But don't go running away with the idea that I might have killed Mr. Boddy. I couldn't have done, even if I wanted to. I was in the conservatory with Mrs. Peacock when he was killed. The Colonel was there too.
prototype rubies. Fingerprints, Mrs. Peacock and Mr. Boddy.
You simply don't understand, my dear.
Oh, yes, I do. I see you all moping around, wrapped up in your own problems. And not one single one of you ever thinks what's going to happen to me. Well, I helped Professor Plum with the formula, and he said that he would buy me a cottage so that I could get away from Mr. Boddy. I have always hated that man. And now it looks as though I'm going to be with him for good. Unless I can prove that Professor Plum invented the formula for the rubies, which I can. Because I know where Mr. Boddy put the rubies when Professor Plum gave them to him. He used to call them his prototypes.
Lead pipe in drawer. Fingerprints smudged, but identifiable as Mr. Green's, Mr. Boddy's, and Colonel Mustard's.
Remember what I said, Green? I just want to make sure that Mrs. Peacock comes out of this in one piece.
If she goes broke because of something Boddy does, I'm sorry, I can't help.
On the contrary, my dear chap. I believe that you can help. Didn't you help Mr. Boddy find Reynolds, his solicitor? And I know that Reynolds is a crook.
What's that got to do with me?
I'll tell you exactly what it's got to do with you. You are mixed up with Boddy in this patent business, aren't you?
Are you threatening me, Colonel?
No, my dear chap. I just wanted to make absolutely certain that we understood each other. It's rather complex, isn't it? Well, I did have contact with the lead pipe, yes. You see, I had this ridiculous idea of frightening Boddy with it, but fortunately for me, he was with somebody at the time, and I never got a chance to use it. I got it from the hall cupboard. I saw it there earlier. In the end, I never did anything with it. I stuffed it in the cupboard in the billiard room. It's all rather embarrassing, really, but there you are. Look here, I know there are some candlesticks in the dining room, but unless somebody actually started pouring gravy from them, I wouldn't notice them. Well, it's not the kind of thing that registers with me, I'm afraid. I mean the candlesticks, not the gravy. Boddy's revolver. Yes, I took it from Miss Scarlet earlier today. I found her in the ballroom waving it about. She was quite clearly distressed. I managed to get it from her and took her off to calm her down. Now, I did leave the gun behind, intending to go back for it when I dealt with Miss Scarlet. However, What with one thing and another. You mean Boddy's knife? Oh, yes, I know that knife. It was one of his favourite things. I can't recall seeing it this weekend, though. No, I'm sorry, I can't help you, I'm afraid. No, I haven't seen one at all. Sorry. Rope? What on earth would I want with a rope? Well, I've no idea if Boddy keeps rope in the house. Well, I've certainly not seen any. What an extraordinary idea. Look here, I think I ought to admit to you straight away that I did threaten Mr. Green. I knew he was involved with Boddy. It was Mr. Green who found a solicitor for Boddy, a solicitor who was crooked enough to ignore all the rules. Rather lacks moral fibre, does Green, I'm afraid. And I hated what all of this was doing to Mrs. Peacock. But I think that Boddy still found the situation rather amusing. I saw him in the lounge earlier on his hands and knees in front of the fire burning a letter. He was chuckling away to himself as if this was the most wonderful joke. Most peculiar. As for killing him, I was with Mrs. Peacock and Mrs. White in the conservatory when he bought it.
Gun recently fired. Fingerprints, Mr. Green and Colonel Mustard. Lock forced. Books in cupboard. Fingerprints on cupboard door. Mrs. Peacock and Mr. Boddy.
If you intend to go ahead with this, you will destroy my family's jewelry business. As a gentleman, you owe it to me.
Oh, don't beg. It doesn't suit you. I knew I had Plum's rubies somewhere. Rather good, aren't they?
You rat, Boddy. You told me the professor's formula was worthless, and all the time you've been working on it for yourself. If you don't give me these 2 weeks, you'll destroy us. And I'm not about to let that happen, I can assure you.
Bravely said. That's the spirit I like to hear.
Will you hold back?
No.
If I were a man, I would kill you now.
A drawer forced. Inside, a damaged presentation box containing prototype rubies. Fingerprints, Professor Plum. The window is broken.
You know these rubies are identical to the ones I sent you with a formula. How could you say they aren't? They're exactly the same.
Really, Plum, you are slow on the uptake. Your ideas didn't work in production. Your rubies were a fluke, a one-off. I had to chuck out most of what you did.
I gave you my formula in trust, Buddy. You said you'd get one of your people to look it over and see if it was viable. And now you've patented it as your own idea.
You sent me an idea for making synthetic rubies. A marvelous idea. But it didn't work. I developed a formula that did, and that formula is now my patent. It has nothing to do with you, Plum. Now get out before I throw you out.
That's right, Buddy. First steal my ideas, and then threaten me. That's about your level, isn't it, eh? Hey? I'll show you what I think of your patent.
Yes, Mrs. White dragooned me into carrying one of them from the dining room to the kitchen. She was in the middle of spring cleaning, I think. I took it into the kitchen. That's all I can remember about it. You really do ask the most extraordinary questions. If I were about to kill Boddy, the last thing on earth I would use is a lead pipe. Think of the mess. I would surely use something a little less primitive. Well, to answer your question, I have not seen a lead pipe. No, I have not seen any rope. It's hardly the kind of thing Mrs. White would allow in her domain, is it? She's far too house-proud to allow great hunks of rope to float about the place. If there was any, it would have been in a cupboard somewhere. No, I have no recollection of seeing a gun this weekend. I do believe it's the kind of thing I would have noticed, had it been in the vicinity. However, I am now certain that I heard a gun being fired in the ballroom. I'm rather ashamed to admit it, but yes, I did see the knife. I was rather desperate to get my letter back from Boddy's desk, so I went into the study and used the knife to open the drawer where he kept it. The letter had gone, no sign of it. I still had the knife when I went into the lounge, so I just left it there. A wrench? No, I cannot recall seeing anything like that in the house. You do mean a wrench, an adjustable wrench? Although I suppose it makes little difference if you're hit over the head with it. A wrench?
You will know by now that Boddy was about to market an idea he had stolen from me, so I can hardly claim a perfect relationship with him. I had come up with a formula for synthetic rubies, which would have revolutionized the market and made me a considerable fortune. I gave my formula to Boddy so that it could be assessed by some of his business associates. He told me they'd turned the idea down, but he was actually trying to patent the process in his own name. I still find it hard to believe. I was pretty angry at the time, but I did not kill him. It is not in my character to do such a thing. At the time of his death, I was in the study with Miss Scarlet. She will confirm this.
There's bound to be something I've forgotten, but I can't tell you any more at the moment.
I know that it must seem ridiculous to you that I got involved in this deal with Boddy. I found him a solicitor, a guy called Reynolds, who would push through the patent process without asking too many questions. I only did it because I needed the money. Miss Scarlet and I wanted to get married, and Mr. Boddy refused to release any of her trust money. The only way we could get out of his clutches was for me to make enough to make her independent of him. But I think the professor must have had the best motive for killing Boddy. Ask him what he was doing earlier, creeping out of the study carrying a large and vicious-looking knife. No, I haven't seen a gun. I wasn't even aware Boddy kept a gun, although it doesn't surprise me that he did. He was the type, wasn't he?
You think the murder took place in the dining room? But who was the murderer? Which? And this is your accusation? You think the murderer was Mr. Green, in the dining room, with the gun?
Congratulations, you've got it all right. Let's go back and have a look at it step by step and see how it happened.
Mr. Green was a fool to trust Mr. Boddy, and he knew it. When Mr. Boddy stole Professor Plum's idea for making synthetic rubies, Mr. Green found a crooked solicitor to secure the patent in Mr. Boddy's name. Mr. Boddy agreed to give him 10% of the profits. But now he was claiming that he knew nothing about this part of the bargain. Mr. Green needed the money to marry Miss Scarlet. He knew how she'd react if she found out that he was going to end up with nothing. Worse than that, if Professor Plum could prove that his ideas had been stolen, then Mr. Green would go to jail. But if Mr. Boddy were to meet with an accident, then Professor Plum could keep his formula and Miss Scarlet would inherit her uncle's money. More than enough for the wedding. Mr. Green had acquired a weapon earlier in the day. He'd found the gun where Colonel Mustard left it, on the piano in the ballroom. He wasn't sure about using it, but he put it in his pocket and was about to go when he realized that Mrs. Peacock had been watching him. His opportunity came after dinner. He decided to go looking for Mr. Boddy, and he found him in the dining room, still toying with the cheese, a glass of good port in his hand. Mr. Green didn't hesitate. One shot was enough. He hurried out of the room without noticing the blood on Mr. Boddy's chair. He disposed of the gun by hiding it in the library, getting away as fast as he could. But he never thought about wiping it clean of incriminating fingerprints.
And there you have it. That's how Mr. Boddy met his fate. Why not come back again and see if you can solve the next murder at Arlington Hall? Hmm?